We welcome those of you who are joining us by live stream at our extension campuses, and welcome to Tuesday Night Chapel, Spring 2019. It's a privilege for me to introduce a friend, Pastor Andy Stanley. He's the senior pastor of the North Point Community Church in Alpharetta, Georgia. He's a communicator, he's an author, he's a pastor. He founded the Atlanta-based North Point Ministries in 1995. And North Point Ministries consists today of 9 churches in the Atlanta area and a network of more than 90 churches around the globe that collectively serve close to 200,000 people on a weekly basis. He holds an undergraduate degree in journalism from Georgia State University and a master's degree from Dallas Theological Seminary. Yeah. He's the author of more than 20 books, and over 1.8 million of his messages, leadership videos, and podcasts are accessed, listen to this, from North Point's website monthly. Quite an outreach. However, nothing is as personal as his passion for engaging with live audiences, which he's pursued for over 2 decades in leadership events around the world. And he's here tonight with his wife, Sandra. They have 3 grown children and 1 foster child who's now moving toward adulthood, and they live near Atlanta. Sandra is here, but also we want to welcome 2 Atlanta students who are here with them. One is his daughter, Allie, and a friend, Lexi. Where are you 2 sitting? Where did you hide out? Back here. Stand so we can welcome you and Sandra. Sandra. Last count, and I think I'm behind, more than 50 of the staff from North Point Ministries have come through and gotten their degree at Dallas Seminary through our extension, and some have migrated to the campus. And so these 3 that you just saw, including Andy's wife, are current students in Atlanta, the residency program and the program there. They've been so supportive of what we've been doing, and so we're very, very grateful. Andy, thank you for spending the time with us. We're going to work him hard and put him up wet, to use a Texas expression. He's going to speak here tonight. Then I'll speak right before he does in the morning at a leaderboard event, and then I'm going to ship him back over here, and he's going to speak in chapel tomorrow morning. So we're going to work him hard while he's here. But Andy, thank you for spending the time with us out of a very busy schedule. Would you join me in welcoming Andy Stanley?
I was told to move this, so I just don't want you to think I was broke anything. Hey, this is, you can imagine how surreal this would be, because you just fast forward, I hate to say how many years it is, 35 years? Yeah, the earth crust had just come together. And yeah, 35 years ago, and I think I've been invited before, but I just wouldn't come. So I wanted to wait till you were out of the chapel into this room. Anyway. I was going to introduce my family, so you did that, and I appreciate it. And I love, love, love Dallas Seminary. And I got to jump into I was going to ask, there has to be a clock somewhere. Is this the clock? Is there a countdown? What time do I need to finish? 8:25-ish. Did he say ish? Anyway, so I'll do my best. Just wave at me. It's okay. And I know there's your schedules and stuff, but when I was at DTS, I had 2 or 3 of my, I'll tell you who one of them was, because you know Louis Giglio, he's been here. But when I was here at DTS, Louis was at another seminary not too far away. It was less, the tuition was less, and you didn't have to stay as long. This is going out of the room. I need to be very careful. I'm sorry. And anyway, the point of all that was, we would compare notes. Louis and I have known each other since we were in the 6th grade, so we've been childhood friends. I know. Anyway, I would get together with him and a couple other friends that were from my church that were over there, and we compare notes. And I'm not exaggerating. They just felt like they were kind of getting a union card, kind of a certification to let them go lead churches. And I loved seminary. In fact, my daughter just switched. She just started her THM. She went from a master's degree to upgraded. I don't know what her original one was. Anyway, so she just started Greek. Pray for her. Anyway, so I just absolutely loved it. And I'll never forget, I was just sharing this a few minutes ago. My dad would come visit, And I was here, I call them the glory days. You'll think these are the glory days. They're not, but you'll think they are. I mean, they are for you. But for me, I was here when Dr. Ryrie was teaching, Dr. Pentecost, Dr. Hendricks. Yes, there you go. That's what I'm talking about. And so it was just, it's always so rich, but it was so rich. So my dad would come and visit, and he would go to class with me. And I'll never forget, I had a night class. I had the last class Dr. Ryrie taught, and it was night class. It was lecture hall, a lot of people, and long, where you have like an intermission. I don't think you call it intermission, but, you have to have a break. So during the break, Dr. Ryrie comes over to my dad and says, Dr. Stanley, would you like to address the class? I would love for you to say something to the students. My dad's like, no. No, he said, you just keep teaching. He said, he turned to me, he said, you have no idea how good this is. And he had gone to that other seminary not too far away. So anyway, I am so grateful. In fact, tomorrow at chapel, I'm going to talk a little bit about this, but there are so many things that to this very day shape me and have shaped not only how I view the Bible and not only how I preach and teach, but how I see the world and how I view the world. And I'm just extremely grateful. And I know you appreciate that as well, but you won't appreciate what's happening now as much until you're out and maybe years from now. And again, as you interface with people who perhaps went to some other schools and didn't get the Bible and didn't get the theology, honestly, then I'll get back to what they're getting is stuff that they could just get out of books. Most everything you know is already in a book, right? But what you're being taught here, the layers, the wealth, the rich, again, the theology in the Bible, it's just as Dr. Hendricks used to tell us, it's what's equipping you for a lifetime of ministry. And I've kind of had that lifetime of ministry, and that was no exaggeration. So I know you feel that way, but I just want you to know I feel that way, because sometimes seminary gets a bad rap. But when I hear that, I'm like, you just went to the wrong one. That's what I always say. Oh, seminary. I'm like, you know what? You're right, but just because you went to the wrong one. Okay. All right, so real quick, I want to find out who's here. Pastors' wives, you just came because there was something to do tonight. You're not in class. Pastors' wives just hanging out. No pastors' wives that aren't students. How many pastors' wives are students? Got pastors' wives or students? 4. That's great. Okay, how many of you work with high school students currently? Yeah, that was, okay, I'm going to ask that again, and I want you to do it correct. How many of you work with high school students currently? No, come on, a little noise. That's the group that always goes, woo, yeah. God. How about middle school? Middle school? Thank you. Middle school, right? Senior pastors or senior leaders or campus pastors? Yeah, they never make any noise. It's like tired. Yeah. Let's see. How many of you work in a church currently, and if you have to explain to people what your job is and they still don't understand after you finish explaining it, but you do work in a church, you have one of those jobs? Yeah, it's like impossible to explain. They're like, you do what? Yeah. Let's see, any worship leaders, music folks? Yep, 2 or 3 of them, great. Students who you're just doing some other job just to get through, but it's not in a church, just out in the market. Real jobs, we call those, yeah. Good. How many of you, last question, how many of you are preachers? I had 2 more, actually. Preachers' kids, I forgot that one. Preachers or missionaries' kids? Yeah, it's matter, yep, good. And then how many of you plan or your life aspiration, and don't be shy about this. This isn't a trick question or pride, like if you raise your hand, that's pride, therefore it'll never happen for you. Because I used to, when I lived in Dallas, they opened the Mormon temple here when I was in seminary. And so we went, and my friend from Idaho, Larry, said, hey, if we go, they're going to ask you to sign up to register, because we wanted to tour the temple before they consecrate it. And he said, that's a trick, because you have to give them information to go in, but then they're going to visit you. I'm like, I'm game. Are you game? He said, I'm game. I'm from Idaho, okay? They have no idea what they're stepping into. So sure enough, the missionaries would come and visit us, and we just strung it out as long as we could. It was wonderful. We were single, didn't have anything else to do, so we learned. I read almost all the Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price. It was like an education within an education, and he grew up with Mormons, and I'd have to kind of like, shh, don't say that, they won't come back, Anyway, so the point of that was the trick with Mormons, I'll get to this in a second, is, because you can get all this in a book, there's all those levels, but you can't say you think you're going to go to the highest one, because that's pride, and then you won't get to go. It's kind of that trick. Did you know that? It's like Anyway, so this is not a trick question. How many of you would like to be a lead pastor or a senior pastor in your own church someday? That's what you're shooting for. Come on, way up there. Let me see. Really, that's it? 6 of you? What are the rest of y'all going to do? Work for... Okay. Well, what I want to talk about for just a few minutes is I think, and you would agree with this. I know this. I just think one of the things that was a passion for me coming out of seminary and going into, I worked at a church here, and then I worked for my dad for 10 years before I left and started North Point. Is I just thought that the local church, the Monday through Friday part should be like the most extraordinary organization in the world. I just thought, Sunday is Sunday, everybody's on their best behavior. It's Sunday, we're doing ministry. But I just felt like the organizational side of the local church, the work part, the work day, the Monday through Friday, the blocking and tackling, the paperwork and all that stuff. I just thought the local church should be like the greatest organization in the world, and that marketplace leaders would see the local church staff and be like, oh my goodness, where do you find these people? Because we have everything going for us. We have a shared work ethic. We're doing our work as unto the Lord. We should have like the greatest work ethic in the world. It should be the safest and most wonderful place for women to work on a church staff where there's, these high morals and value and dignity for men and women. There are so many things we have going for us. We have a 2,000-year-old product. Anyway, so I just feel like that the organizational side of the ministry, the church world, should be extraordinary. So this was a real passion for me coming out of seminary, and then working I worked for a church here, and then I worked for my dad's church, and honestly, and my dad and I kid about this, there were so many dysfunctional people on his staff, and I'd be like, Dad, do you know? He's like, I know. I'm like, well, is she a Christian? I don't know, So, slight exaggeration, not much. I felt there were just lazy people, and then and just lazy people in ministry, pastors kind of hiding, it's just terrible. And I thought, if I'm ever, that's why I asked you to raise your hand. I thought if I ever get to be like the boss, because I thought I'd be in student ministry forever. I love student ministry. I thought if I ever get to be a pastor and control the destiny of a church, I just think the organizational side should be amazing. I just think people would want to leave higher paying jobs and marketplace jobs to just become part of this great organization beyond the Sunday part, because we have everything going for us. And so this was a real passion of mine from the beginning. So when we started North Point, the organization, and started the church, I spent so much of my time just in terms of office culture and organizational culture, not just mission and vision, for the people who attended the church, because I thought it was such a big deal. And we did several things that other organizations do. We copied and cut and pasted and, kind of made some things better. But through the years, we've been going for North Point's 23 years old this past fall. As I think about all of that, I feel like it kind of all comes down to maybe just three things, and I don't want to talk about three things tonight. I just want to talk about one thing. But I want to talk about this one thing, because regardless of where you work now or regardless of where you work eventually, and for those of you who want to be lead pastors, in terms of just the culture of your church, I think all the secret sauce is in the New Testament, and I just want to pull out this one idea that comes from one verse, that comes from one story from the life of Jesus. That is, I promise, this isn't me looking, I got this great leadership idea. I need a verse. There's a verse attached. I promise it's not this. This, for me personally, was birthed from the teaching of the New Testament. And I think as you think about your future, and as you think about leading any kind of organization, whether it's middle school, high school, a church, a network church, a parachurch organization, a department, a division, whatever, wherever you find yourself in leadership, I think this one idea, combined with a couple others, but even if you just have this one, is so powerful. In fact, I think it represents the most powerful relational dynamic in the whole world, and it's right here in the New Testament. And so I've worked very hard to internalize this. I'll give you a couple illustrations in a minute. But I've worked equally as hard to drive this through the fabric of our organization. And I wanted to talk about this tonight because hopefully I can say it in such a way that you'll remember it and that you'll take this with you into your family, because this is where this starts, but also into your church. Because I think the church, the organizational side of the church, should be so phenomenal that, again, that marketplace leaders look what's going on inside the church and are like, are you kidding me? I have a current example of this. There's a Jewish guy in our business community. He's 27 years old. He went bankrupt in college because he started a company out of his dorm with a guy. He's just one of those guys that's just going to figure it out. He's Jewish. He's not religious at all. He's not any kind of religious at all. And he knew a friend of a friend, and he asked a friend of a friend if I would call him, or if he could call me anyway. It's a long story. So I never met this guy. His name's Eric, and he wouldn't mind me telling you his name. In fact, he would like it if I told you his name. So he said, I want to have breakfast with you. He's 20, I think he's 27, 28. And I said, okay. So I had breakfast with this guy. I'm like, oh, hey, it's hard for me to meet unchurched people who are far from God. So I'm like, hey, this is an excuse. This is what he said. He said, okay, he just got right to business. He said, okay, I came to your church out in Alpharetta. And he said, okay, that's amazing. It's amazing. He said, then I found out you had 2. So then I went to the one in Buckhead, and I thought, oh, you figured out how to scale this. That's what he said. You figured out how to scale this. I want you to teach me how you scaled that. He said, you got a lot of these, right? I'm like, yeah, we're like McDonald's. Chick-fil-A, excuse me. So then he got to know our staff. Anyway, the point is this. I was thrilled. I'm thrilled because I got a new lost friend. I'm thrilled that he's Jewish. That's kind of interesting. There's a lot of things. But the thrilling thing was our organization, I'm not making this up, our organization is what he found attractive. And I just think at every level in the local church, we should be amazing. And if we're not amazing, we should become amazing. And I'm going to get to my notes. This sounds harsh, okay? But your local church, or whatever local church you're a part of, or whatever local church you lead, the organization itself, because it's the body of Christ and because of what it represents in the community, that organization, that church is more important than anyone in it. That's what I believe. It's more important than anyone in it, which means there are some people you should possibly get out of it so it can be as great as it can possibly be because of what's at risk and what's at stake and how important the body of Christ is in any local community. So that was kind of how I, went into this. And all these years later, I love our church. I love all the stuff we do. I love the organizational side of it because of the ministry and the testimony it is to people who are just watching, not just watching the Christians and not watching the preaching and teaching. You can get that anywhere, right? So this is a really big deal. And that's why I just thought I would share this with you. So I'm just going to share this one idea, and I'll hit this kind of quick. Basically, I just call this, because I kind of ripped it off from the Apostle Paul's language, I call this the principle of mutual submission. Let's just say that together. That was terrible. One more time. Mutual submission. This is the most powerful relational dynamic in the world. In a marriage, with your kids, with your grandkids, with your foster kids, eventually it works, and in organizational life. And of course, this comes from what the Apostle Paul said in Ephesians 5:21, when he said, submit, this is so powerful, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Which is, this is basically his version of as I loved you, you're to love one another. That's what I think all Paul's applications or imperatives in the New Testament come from Jesus' new command. So here it is again, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That is, I am to relate to you in light of how God through Christ has related to me. Those are my marching. And then the next verse is the one that gets all the airplay, right? Women, what's the next verse? And wives, what? Ladies, you don't sound very submissive. Come on, let's... Yeah, and wives submit, and that's the one that gets all the airplay, but it's like, the oldest Greek manuscripts, there's not even a verb in that verse because they had to borrow from the one before. And these are our marching orders. We are to submit to one another, not because we're worth submitting to. We're to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. God sent his son into this world to submit, put himself up under the burden of my sin. And he's like, wow, now you go do that for everybody else. That's costly. I know, I illustrated it for you. It's very costly, but it works. It's the most powerful relational dynamic. In any relationship where you have two people trying to out-submit each other, when I teach on marriage, I say, marriage is a race to the back of the line. That's what it is. You just keep racing to the back of the line, you'll have a great marriage. My wife's sitting here, right? Sometimes she lets me win that race. Anyway, just kidding. So the Apostle Paul takes this idea of mutual submission and he applies it to marriage. But Jesus takes the very same idea and applies it to his gang. This is one of these cool narratives, Mark chapter 10. I'm just going to read it to you. You know exactly what I'm going to say. When I say Mark 10, you know where we are, right? No, you don't. It's okay. Mark chapter 10 is the chapter right after Mark 9. Mark chapter 10, verse 32. The disciples, they're on their last trip to Jerusalem. When they get to Jerusalem, the end is near, but they think this is the beginning of something great. He's raised Lazarus from the dead. There's so much talk. There's spies in Jerusalem. Everybody's looking for Jesus. There's going to be Jesus sightings everywhere because he's coming to Jerusalem. This is the last Passover. He's going to pull off his Messiah robe, and it's going to be, his rabbi robe is going to be a big M on the front, a big K on the back, and he's going to be the king, and the guys are like, this is it, They were on their way up to Jerusalem with Jesus leading the way. The disciples were astonished because he had just basically said rich people aren't God's favorites. They're trying to figure that out. and they were following along, and they were afraid. And again, he took the 12 aside, and wherever Jesus goes, you know this, there's a crowd everywhere. So when it says the disciples, it could be hundreds of people, dozens of people. So he has to stop, and he pulls the 12 out with, the other hundreds or dozens of people. He's like, I just need a time moment with these guys. He took the 12 aside. They're on their way to Jerusalem, and he told them what's going to happen to him. Now, I don't know if in the first century this was funny. It's sad funny, but so here's what happened. He gets them off to the side. He goes, okay, we're going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death. They will hand him over to the Gentiles, who will mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise. And Mark says, and we believe Mark got his information from Peter. Peter was there, saw all this. Who's going to mock him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And 3 days later, he will rise. Verse 35 says, then, as soon as Jesus finishes, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, raised their hand and said, we have a question. Yes. Will you do for us whatever we ask? Okay, I mean, that's too bad about the mocking and spitting and flogging. I don't know, that sounds awful, but we have a question. It's like, really? Then, right after he just tells, he got this tender moment, it's like, we're parents, with 3 kids and, family devotionals. We didn't do very well. Our family devotionals went like this. I would just bring home email. My daughter's here, my wife's here, I'm not making this up. I would just bring home email from work of stories where sin just wrecked someone's life. And I would just read those at the dinner table. Sometimes I would exaggerate a little bit and say, whoo, that's what sin will do. Let's pray. Lord, thanks for the food. And I thought, why be creative? I could just tell people's real life stories and try to scare my kids away from sin. And it worked for the most part. But those tender moments where you're trying to have that moment with your kid and your daughter or your son goes, Daddy, yes. What's that thing on your nose? It's like, okay, so this is one of those moments. He's just like, what? Yeah. So Jesus goes along with it like a good parent. So what do you want me to do for you, he says. And they replied, hey, would you let one of us sit on your right, on the other one on your left in your glory? After all that other stuff, we'll probably hang back during the spitting and the mocking and flogging. But when that's over, could one of us sit on, this is just so ridiculous. It's unbelievable. And it's just all tied right there together. Let one of us sit on your right and the other on your left in your glory. In other words, we want positions of authority. And when the 10 heard about this, this story, they became indignant with James and John. And the indication is they weren't indignant like, how dare you, how insensitive. They're indignant like, wait, what about us? We want to be on your left and your right. So cool. So Jesus, really? We're on our way to Jerusalem. We're at the end of the story, and they still haven't figured this out. When Jesus called them together, he got them all together. Okay, sit down. Again, the crowd's off to the side. It's so powerful. Jesus called them together, and he said, hey, do you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, you know how they lord it over them? Do you know how their high officials exercise authority over them? You know how it is that the people in power leverage their power for their benefit to the demise and to the disregard of the people under them? You know how the people at the top with all the stuff get all the stuff and the people that don't have the stuff don't get any stuff because all the stuff's going up? You know how that works? You know how this works in the world? And of course, the apostles are like, yeah, we know how it works. Why do you think we want to be number 2 and number 3? We know exactly how it works, and you're about to be the king, and we know we can't be number 1, but we want to be number 2 and number 3, right? Yes, we know how it works. That's why we want to be close to you when you are the king of Israel. And these next 4 words, I think Jesus just reaches right through the centuries and the generations and the churches into all of our faces. Anybody in seminary, any of us in ministry, any of us with any aspirations, any, thing that we want to do something for God, something great for God or serve God. I think these next 4 words are just transgenerational. Do you know how it is with the leader, the Gentiles, they lord over them? Yeah. And I think he leans in. And he gets his finger right up in my face and his finger right up in your face. And he says, not so with you. You know how it works? I know how it works. Not so with you. You know how it is everywhere else? Of course we know how it is everywhere else. This is why. Not so with you. Isn't that amazing? Instead, whoever wants to become great among you. I love this phrase because he's like, hey, you want to become great? Yeah, good. Oh, it's good to want to become great. I'm about to tell you how to be great. It's not bad to want to be great. It's just how you be great. Instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant, and the one who wants to be first must be slave of all. In other words, this is how it's going to work with me. You know how it works everywhere else, but in my deal, this is how it's going to work. Whoever wants to be great serves everybody else. You're not going to see that modeled anywhere else, and you're not even going to think it'll work. But if you're going to be part of my kingdom and part of my posse and part of my ecclesia and part of my movement, my assembly and my congregation, this is how it works. And then he takes away all of their/our excuses. He says, for even. I think every Christian leader should memorize this verse. Let's see, what is it? I'm just kidding. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, a little foreshadowing, and to give his life a ransom for many. They have no idea what he's talking about. For even the Son of Man, hey guys, have you not been paying attention? For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And they had no idea what was just really hours away. So mutual submission. It's not just a marriage thing, but it works in marriage. It's not just a family thing. It's an organizational thing. It's a kingdom thing. It's a church thing. It's a structure thing. And when you find yourself as a point leader in any capacity in the local church, you need to figure out how to get this right. So I'm going to give you some super specific tips in 3 minutes. Okay, so the message of mutual submission, now I'm going to kind of dive back into organizational context. The message of mutual submission is simply this: I'm here to facilitate your success regardless of where our names are on the org chart. I'm here to facilitate your success regardless of where our names are on the org chart, because you got to have an org chart. But in the kingdom of heaven, you don't operate by the org chart. You may have one. I mean, we know Jesus is number 1. We don't know who number 2 and number 3 is. Doesn't matter. But regardless of the org chart, I'm here to facilitate your success. In fact, the higher I am up on the org chart, the more success of yours I can facilitate. The assumption of mutual submission is that while our responsibilities differ, we are both essential to the success of this enterprise. If you've hired well, every single person is essential. Every Sunday when I show up at one of our campuses and I get there way early, I walk in and there's volunteers. The volunteers got there before me and I'm the boss. Wow. So, and they're all like, hey, and everybody calls me Andy. They don't have pastor or anything. Says, hey, Andy. And they're thank you. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Thank me. You got here before me? And no, thank you. I mean, I want to know every volunteer's name. My assistant, Diane, sends me the list of all the band and the main production people every single Saturday. So when I show up, I can know everybody's name because you have different teams coming and going. I want to know their names. I mean, thanking me, if it wasn't for you, I would be on my front porch gathering people in the front yard and preaching. I mean, my success and my ability to use my gift is dependent upon hundreds of other people. I mean, we may be different places in the org chart, but there are no non-essential personnel. So there's nobody that's really actually functionally more important than anybody else. If you have a great organization and if you've hired well, but here's the beauty, if you forget everything else I say, this is the question that organizationally I think drives mutual submission deep, deep, deep into an organization. And it's a very, very simple question. And the question is, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And I want us to all say that out loud together because some of you have never said that in your whole life. Okay, so here we go. And all the wives are like, yes, finally. Ready? What can I do? I'm telling you, this question is so powerful and it gets asked up all the time. It becomes powerful when it gets asked down. See, of course I expect my administrative assistant to say, Andy, what can I do to help, right? Well, she's my administrative assistant. She's assisting me, right? But it's way more powerful when I say to Diane, hey, before I go, what can I do to help you? It's like, wow, that kind of stands out, doesn't it? I think great leaders ask that question a lot. And I'll tell you why you won't ask it. Because you're afraid they'll have an answer. We want to ask it like this. Hey, what can I do to help? I asked, did you hear my question right? The problem is if I say, what can I do to help? What if they have stuff for me to do? It's like, oh no, I have more stuff to do, right? But this is what makes it great. This is what makes it mutual. And the further you are up in your organization, the more you're able to help. So let's say it one more time together. Ready? What can I do? And let me just stop and say this. For some married people in here, that one question could be a game changer. Because your spouse doesn't hear it. And you love her and you love him in your heart. That question just puts it out there. Because that question says this. I am making all of me available to you. What's the best way to leverage all of me so that you get from me what you need? What can I do to help? This is a very difficult principle to get into a church that has an ecclesiology that basically sees the pastor as God's anointed, right? I'm God's anointed, and you're not God's anointed, but I'm God's anointed. So God talks to me, then I talk to you. This doesn't work there. Actually, that's not even biblical, of course, but there's a lot of churches that operate that way, right? So when I run into people like that, I go, God's anointed. Have you done much study about God's anointed? In fact, that whole God's anointed thing, that was King Saul. Are you King Saul? Do you know how that worked out? A random arrow finds a crack in his armor, and then he begs his bodyguard or his armor bearer to kill him, and he runs off and lets him find, no, you don't want to be God's anointed, okay? It's better to go with what the Apostle Paul said because he made it so clear. I'm not anointed. I'm part of a body. So that's a much better word picture, right? Because everybody has their gift. I mean, you know this, right? I'm just the talker. And some of you are the talkers and some of you administrators. I mean, you know all this. So we already have a model. We already have a framework for mutual submission. And your body is a picture of mutual submission. Imagine if any one of your body parts decided to act independently. That's called ugly because they usually end up getting cut off and put in a jar. You ever seen a hand? In fact, I tried to do this in a sermon one time. I didn't know this. You cannot get actual body parts in formaldehyde. I thought I could go to the CDC in Atlanta and say, I just need some hands and feet for an illustration. I promise I'll bring them back. They're like, did you know that's illegal? I'm like, I see it in movies all the time. Well, those aren't real. Because I thought it would be cool to have these jars with hands and feet, and I was going to do an illustration and say, this is what a disconnected body part looks like. Don't be a disconnected body part. Get busy in the church. I thought that was pretty powerful. You cannot get those. So we made our own. And they were gross. There were people that they just had to look away. So we had these plastic feet and hands and body parts in jars with yellow water, and I had them covered up. And I say, if you're not active in the church, this is what you look like. You're gross. And we had all these people sign up to volunteer. It was great. Because nobody wants to be that gross. But we already have a picture, right? It's a body. There's not a point. The point leadership's one thing, but this whole I'm God's anointed and God speaks to me and then I speak to you. If you're in that model church, you should get out of that church. That's not even a church. I don't really know what that is. So anyway, real quick, 4 really super practical things as you think about doing this. I'm going to give you 4 statements, then I'll wrap this up. In terms of, again, driving this through the organization, the question is one, but in terms of some habits and for some of you, you can't do this now because you're not in a position of authority, but I'm telling you, the moment you have 10 volunteers or 5 volunteers, you can start this. And if this becomes the rhythm of your leadership life, it will serve you well because it'll set a rhythm and a pattern for the people who follow you. So number 1, mutual submission. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. You may have heard me say that before. Do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. You remember growing up and, adults, they were awful. You would ask them, if I do it for you, I have to do it for everybody else, and you go up with your plastic tray in the cafeteria line, and, there's a lady with the hairnet, and you ask for another brownie. Can I have another brownie? Well, if I give you one, I have to give everyone one. And do you remember what you thought in that moment? What'd you think? No, you don't. Isn't that what you thought? No, you don't have to give everyone else one. You can just give me one. And I think that got in our hearts and minds as kids, and we're like, if I can't do it for everybody, I'm not going to do it for anybody. Wrong. Symbolic leadership, and this is so powerful, you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. This is how you mutually submit. This way you are able to submit yourself to the person who's important, the person that's not important, the person that needs a lot, that needs a little, but every once in a while, when you can do for one, and don't worry about being fair. In fact, in ministry, don't be fair, be engaged. Don't be fair, be engaged. A little Bible, I think this is biblical. Fairness, it's out of the Old Testament too, which is going to shock you. Fairness, did you get that? I noticed there's like 3 seminars and stuff from the Old Testament. I'm like, should I go to those? Fairness ended in the Garden of Eden. Nothing's been fair since the Garden of Eden. So do not try to be fair. Be engaged. And the way you be engaged is you look for opportunities to do for one what you would do for everyone. You can't do for everyone, but don't use that as an excuse not to do for anyone. So I tell our lead pastors all the time, you can't do all the weddings, but you better be doing some weddings. You can't do all the funerals, but you got to do some funerals. You can't visit everybody, but you got to visit somebody. One of the things that we do when you work for us for 3 months, you get an evaluation where you evaluate our organization, because if you come to work for us, you have fresh eyes. We want to know what you see that we can't see, because the longer you're somewhere, the less you can see. That's why you have some really weird stuff hanging on your walls at home. You don't see it anymore. But your guests walk in and go, have you seen the wall? But you can't, it's invisible to you. You've been living there too long. Well, that's what happens in organizations too. You can't see it anymore. So we want to take advantage of fresh eyes. And so we ask you, do you have everything you need? Do you have a best friend or anything off mission or purpose? Are you doing what you've been hired to do? We have all these questions that come right to my office. And so every once in a while, somebody will answer, hey, because one of the questions is, do you have everything you need for your job? And every once in a while, somebody will say, well, it really would help if we had a... And so if it's something that's not just like onerous and no one could afford, I just tell my assistant, Diane, I go, hey, just go buy one of those. Just go buy one. So the last one was our receptionist. We have a new receptionist, and she wanted to be able to stand up at the receptionist desk so she didn't have to sit all the time. She said, it'd be great if we had one of those stand-up. I said, just go buy it. I don't know, just go buy one. How much can that be? And so 2 weeks later, I walked in. Her name's Missy, and I had this box. I said, Missy, here's your, and I wanted her to know it's coming from me. I mean, this is important. This is symbolic leadership. I got your form. I read it. This is something we can do. Here's your stand-up desk. Let's unpack it and put it on your desk. So what happens? Do you think she shared that story with anyone? I hope she shared it with everyone so people will know what a great person I am. No. I want them to know I read that stuff, number one, and I want them to know, you know what? If we can, we will, because that's what leaders do. So you look for opportunities to do for one what you wish you could do for everyone. The second one, we'll hit these fast, is when you're in organizational life, you got to figure out a way to systemize top-down service, and so it's not just bottom-up. You got to work that into the rhythm of your organization. Third, you got to celebrate it and repeat it, or celebrate it and reward it when you see it. Quick little leadership thing. This is so important. In organizational life, and with raising kids too, what's rewarded gets repeated. What's rewarded is repeated. When there's something you want repeated, you don't have to keep telling people to do it. You just start rewarding it. It's amazing how people do things for rewards. I do. You do too. So when you see someone who's doing for one what they wish they could do for everyone, when you see people modeling this mutual submission, putting other people first, you just you reward it, and you reward it publicly, and you reward it privately. Lots of illustrations about that. Then the last thing is, and this is for the guys, honestly. I'll just be honest. And it's so neat to see so many women at seminary. There were 4 here when I was here. Just kidding. 8 or 9. and this is such a pastor thing, because we've seen this done wrong. In fact, some of you, what I'm about to say, you're going to think I'm a hypocrite because you think I'm this because you don't know me, or maybe I am and Sandra hasn't told me. But guys, to get this right, if you're going to really embrace mutual submission, and your organization will be better, you'll be better. I think we're commanded. Remember, Jesus said, "Not so with you." Is you have to confront your ego, and this is so hard for us. And by confront your ego, you have to decide. I wrote this in my notes. You have to decide what's most important, and I don't think you decide this one time. I think you decide this monthly, annually. Every time you do a 360, I think this, all of us, we just have to come back to this question over and over. What's most important? Building a great church or building a name for myself? Building a great church or building a name for myself? Because I promise you, at some point along the way, there's going to be a decision, and you'll decide whether you go left or right based on your answer to that question. Because the decision will come along, and this answer is better for building your personal brand, but this answer is better for building the health and increasing the health of the church. And you have to decide ahead of time what you're in this for. And if you're in this for you, I tell pastors this all the time. I say, look, If secretly, and if you're honest, you know what, you're like, you know what, I really am kind of in this for me, and I'm kind of using the local church to build my brand. I said, you should get all your staff together and just tell them. They're like, I don't think so. I'm like, yeah, just tell them. As I said, if you see your staff as supporting cast for your career, tell them. And then I say, actually, they already know. Because they're smart. You've telegraphed it. They know what you're up to. They're not stupid. And all the smart ones will leave, and you'll be left with all the not so smart ones. And they will support you into oblivion, and we're going to read about you later on because you did something stupid because you were surrounded by people who weren't honest with you or dialed in enough to know what was stupid, okay? So you got to confront your ego. You got to decide, am I really in this for something that's bigger than me, or am I in this for me? Because you'll never create the kind of culture that Jesus said we're to create if you don't get that right. Drop loyalty from your vocabulary. Think about this. I mean, that's such a big deal. Loyalty did not even make it as a fruit of the Spirit. I mean, I'm sure Paul had 25. He's like, 25 is too many. Okay, we got to keep cutting. I'm sure loyalty was on the long list, but when he got to the short list of the fruit of the Spirit, loyalty's not even on there. But I mean, good gracious, there's churches where you would think it's the number one, it's the whole list, just loyalty. Didn't even make the list. So just drop that from your vocabulary. The disciples got this because in Acts chapter 6, the big problem in the church is they can't get the disciples to quit serving the widows. It's like, John, really, would you preach? No, I can't preach. I got to serve. I got to do the lowliest thing because he said, not so with you. And I'm like, he died for me. I'm not going to serve the widows. Okay, John, we really need you to teach. We'll get somebody else to do that. They had to pry their fingers off serving widows. Isn't that amazing? And I think it's because Jesus punctuated it during that Passover meal when they finally got to Jerusalem. And he humiliated them. Because they was like, what's he doing? He took off his rabbinic robe. And they're like, oh, no. We didn't get anybody to wash our feet. We'll do it. Jesus like, sit down. Do you know how long it takes to wash, 12 pairs of feet? It takes a long time. Do you know how humiliated they were? Then he puts his rabbinic robe back on. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, because that's what I am. You got it right. Now that I, your teacher and your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, so you should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you that you should do as I've done for you. And very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed, gentlemen, if you do them. Basically what they heard him say was, hey guys, when you start thinking you're a big shot, I mean, when the Holy Spirit comes, everybody wants to hear Peter, and everybody wants a piece of John. When you start thinking you're a big shot, you just remember this night. You just go find some more feet to wash. And you just spend the rest of your life looking for the low place and the small place. And you'll change the world. And that will be what my kingdom is known for. And that's what we're called to do. And it's not hard. It's just that we need a reminder. And if you forget, you just remember Jesus' long, bony Jewish finger saying, not so with you. Heavenly Father, thank you very much for preserving these ancient texts. Thank you for that group of men who got it. We're here because of them. Thank you for recruiting the Apostle Paul, who had every reason in the world to be so arrogant. And he called himself the least of the apostles because he persecuted the church of God. And here we are in their shadow doing what you called us to do. So help us to get it right. And I pray that people will be amazed at how productive we are, and amazed at how humble we are, amazed at how productive we are, and amazed at how well we get along and how well we treat people. So I pray for this group, whatever you have for them in the future. I pray that we would be kingdom-minded. For even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. Thank you all so much.